Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we're going to be doing a review of the first week of the XFL 3.0 and the 2023 season. Now, this review is not going to be like my USFL reviews, this is going to be more in line of exactly the statistics they had, attendance, ratings, and all that kind of stuff, and how it competes with its predecessor as well as the USFL. So first I'm going to go through each game itself and just do a brief review of how each one did in ratings, the gameplay, and attendance, and then I'm going to go put them all into actual perspective. So the first game was the Vegas Vipers versus the Arlington Renegades as the debut game for the XFL 3.0. This is on 3 p.m. on Saturday at Choctaw Stadium. The game itself had 12,047 people attended, and it was broadcasted on ABC. The ABC broadcast ended up getting 1.54 million viewers, and the game itself was a game that was looking to be a blowout, due to the fact that the Renegades offense had done basically nothing the entire game, and the Vipers had. But in the second half, the Vipers threw a couple pick sixes. The Renegades defense really stepped up. And despite a last-second attempt by the Vipers, they were overall not able to actually complete the end of the game, and the Renegades ended up winning. The second game was on that night in the first XFL 3.0 primetime game at 8:30 between the Orlando Guardians and the Houston Roughnecks. That game had 12,784 people in attendance at TDECU Stadium. This was broadcast on both ESPN and FX, and across both networks, ended up getting 1.14 million viewers. The game itself ended up being a complete blowout. It had the Fail Mary Part 2. The Guardians only scored their second touchdown in the end of the game nearly, so it was a complete blowout, and the Roughnecks just completely creamed the Guardians. The third game was the first on Sunday at 3 p.m. on ABC. This was the St. Louis Battlehawks versus the San Antonio Brahmas at the Alamodome. This game had 24,245 people in attendance, and in terms of the ratings for this game ended up having a pretty respectable 1.57 million viewers. This ended up being the most viewed game of the entire weekend. The game itself was a really, really, really bad game, until the last couple minutes, where the Battlehawks pulled off one of the best comebacks we've seen in recent memory, as they were able to score a touchdown, get the 3-point conversion, get the 4th and 15 onside attempt, and score another touchdown to win the game. Then the last game of the first week was the second primetime game that was broadcast on ESPN across a total of 918,000 viewers, with 12,438 people watching at Audi Field. The Seattle Sea Dragons lost to the DC Defenders. This was the best game of the week in terms of the overall game itself. The Defenders fan base was wild with their beer snake throwing lemons on the field. It was a game that both teams overall had pretty good offense and defense. There were a couple slow moments, but overall it was a truly great game. So those are the brief reviews of each of the 4 games. So how do they actually compare to the other iteration of the XFL and the USL? Was it actually an overall success? Now, the main thing to look at if they were successful is their attendance. The reason for this is because the XFL's big draw was their attendance. That's what they viewed as being better than the USL, is that all 8 teams are at their home stadium, versus the hub format where the USL is now going to 4 hubs with 3 at-home teams. So did the XFL actually succeed there? Well, the first one to look at is the San Antonio Brahmas that had 24,245 people in attendance. That number is technically less by a decent margin than the San Antonio Commanders of the AAF, as they had 27.7 thousand as their average viewers or average attendees, but it was still better than their Week 8 game in attendance, so it was kind of mixed. And overall, since that was the main team of the AAF in terms of attendance, and the fact that it was overall a new thing at then, I think that the San Antonio Brahmas were an overall success in attendance. As I said a while back, if you have over 20,000, you're doing something good. So the next is the DC Defenders. The Defenders had 12,438 people in attendance. This is also substantially less. This is about 4,000 less than they averaged in the last iteration of the XFL, and was less than all 3 games that the Defenders had. But the caveat I will give is this was arguably the best crowd in the entire league that week. Both the Brahmas and Defenders games, mainly due to the angles and where people were very hard to see empty seats, versus the other 2, which were very clear there was a ton of empty seats in both the other games. And the Defenders fan base was insane. They were a great fan base, so even though they also technically failed at their attendance marker, I still give them a ton of credit and say it was an overall success because of just how great the fans were. Now, the other two games, they were in the Renegades and Roughnecks, both had about 12,000, though the Roughnecks were closer to 13. The problem with them is that they both also were down from their attendance the last time. For the Roughnecks who were in the same place ended up having 18,000 in the first iteration. So the Roughnecks ended up losing a little over 4,000 attendees, and the Renegades that were called the Dallas Renegades of that one also lost 5,000 viewers. So both of them lost about 5,000 total viewers or attendees, and so overall they both had a much less attendance than they should. Now, a lot of people want to say that's because of cold weather. I don't know if that's a big enough excuse for a 5,000 attendee drop off. So in terms of attendance, especially in those two games, it was very noticeable, had empty seats. And actually, it wasn't as bad as the non-Stallions games of the USFL last year. But considering the fact this is supposed to be the main draw of this league, is that people are actually in attendance, and they still didn't really do that well. That, I would say, is a bad thing. Now, how about the actual TV ratings, right? So the TV ratings is the one that technically matters the most. Did they have legitimately good TV ratings? As that's how you're going to really make the money and what matters the most. So in terms of that aspect, overall, again, in a short and sweet way, no, the XFL 3.0 also was pretty bad in that regard. So you need to note something is that this first week, in terms of the regular season, is the best week of scheduling the XFL has the entire season. They don't have another ABC game for a few weeks, so that's their best network is ABC, and they don't even have a game for another few weeks. Now, the good thing is that their Game 3 did do better than Game 1. I will give them a lot of credit for that, as that's tough to do to have any game surpass your opening. But that's also a bad thing that your opening only got 1.54 million. To note, all three of the other leagues, the AAF, XFL 2.0, and USFL, all had over 3 million. Now, yes, the USFL had both the Fox and NBC simulcast, but to view that they would have only half of that is pretty stupid. So either way, the USFL completely creamed them in the opening game. Then the second game, the USFL had 2.15 million viewers compared to the XFL's 1.14, and that's also with having two channels do it in their second best network in ESPN and FX. Now, yes, the USFL was on NBC, so they had that advantage, but they still had almost twice as many viewers as the XFL. Now, where the XFL does better is in games 3 and 4. Now, note the two caveats for those games, because there are two huge caveats. Just like how I just said that, yes, the USFL creamed the XFL, but they were on their broadcast, overall great network. Same thing for this one. ABC had 1.57 million viewers, which totally beat USA 770,000. So, again, both Game 2 and 3 kind of are a wash because of the fact that one of them didn't have a network. Though, the fact that USFL only had it on one network versus two is also a pretty good thing for the USFL. In Game 4, the XFL didn't crack a million. They were at 918,000 versus the USFL's 270,000. Now, the one major caveat is that you cannot view that as either side as a true win. The reason is that game was broadcast on a completely different day than it was supposed to. The original schedule had 3 separate games being played on April 17th. But due to the rain that happened, the Stars-Breakers game got pushed back by about an hour, if I'm not mistaken, and then you had the Bandits-Maulers game be pushed to the next day. So instead of being played at their original time of a Sunday night game, it was moved to a Monday night game at 7 o'clock. So that rating is hit a lot because it's not on one of their main networks of NBC or Fox, and it was pushed back a day to a Monday night rating. So when you eliminate that one, overall the best way to view it is that the XFL's ratings are overall decent, aside from their first game being pretty bad as not a single game cracked 2 million. But the big caveat is that this was their best week. Now they're going to be stuck having multiple games on FX. They're going to have no ABC game for a while. And we're about to see whether or not FX and ESPN2 are good enough to carry the ratings. Because there's a couple weeks in the next few where there's not a single game on ESPN or ABC. That's what's going to be the most intriguing if the XFL can surpass those weeks. So overall, was the first week successful? I believe yes, it was. The fact is it got through a week and it did have a lot of decent things about it. The gameplay was good, even if only two of the games were truly good games. Then you also had the ratings that were good enough. At the end of the day is you just need to have about 1 million viewers and you're a solid program to have. Though I do think overall they did not meet the goals of beating the USFL's opening ratings, just due to the fact that the USFL had 2 games on their lower end networks and one of them was pushed back a day, and they overall still pretty much competed with the XFL. But I will also say the fact is that the XFL's attendance, even though it was not as good as it should be and definitely is a question for concern, we haven't seen them play at either of their 2 other main draws. As San Antonio, Seattle, and St. Louis are their big draws, and we haven't seen them play there. And I'm really intrigued to see how many people show up for those, as I have a feeling the Battlehawks are about to have a huge home field advantage. But we'll see. Now, as for these week reviews, I'm probably only going to be doing a couple of them. I might do one. I'm probably going to do one during the middle of the season where I'm just kind of looking at all the ratings and attendance and how they did, and then one at the end of the year. I'm not going to do this every week, but I will definitely keep up with this every few weeks. So this has been ZomFox. If you enjoy this content and want to be notified as soon as I upload any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. As the next couple weeks, I'm going to be having some draft recap from the USFL come out. So as always, have a great night.